Hey everybody, my name is Lisa and I'm the Crafty Goddess. Hello and welcome. If you're new to my channel, don't mind the noises in the background. We've got some kitties that are being a little exploratory right now. If you're new to the channel, I make stuff. I buy stuff to make stuff when I can afford it. I also do some dabbling in the kitchen when the heat isn't so sweltering. It feels like I'm nestled in the devil's armpit, which is what's happening right now here in southwestern Ontario. It's a bit of a heat wave, but I like to explore and make fun things. If this interests you at all, if you like the occasional yarn haul video, feel free to drop in and subscribe if you like. Thanks for stopping by to come visit. If you are returning to my channel, welcome back. Good to see you again. Today's video is a tag. I was tagged by Fiber Spider in the a top 10 list that he devised. It's top 10 favorite books and movies. I had previously been tagged in a video of his where he did top 10 songs. This was a trend that had been previously established by other YouTubers. And in that, if anybody watched that last video, it was hard for me to pick a top 10 favorite song list. I mean, I've got some, but it's kind of an ongoing changing list because it's kind of like picking my 10 favorite children. You know what I mean? I said that in the last video as well. So it's the same, shall we say, picking problem for these top 10 lists. And again, they kind of change. It varies from I'm going to say day to day sometimes, but the 10 that sprung to mind the most immediately were the ones that I committed to for these lists. So the top 10 favorite books and movies, I've gotten written down the and again, as compared to the last top 10 video I did, let's just say that the runner-up list is significantly longer and there's quite a few honorable mentions, but I won't bore you with that. Let's get on with this list here. We're going to start with 10 favorite books. And yes, as I did with the previous video, I will include at the end people that I want to tag so I can look at their lists and be nosy as well. All right. So, top 10 favorite books. Again, these were ones that just jumped to mind right away that have stuck with me, ones that I like to go back and reread on occasion. The the selection's a bit all over the map, but I would say that I love to read. I am a voracious reader. Unfortunately, I haven't read as much lately because of my schooling and whatnot. The most reading I did there were a lot of medical charts and whatnot. Medical texts, school texts, you get it, but I do try to indulge my, work my brain muscle. So the first one on the list, again, no particular order, just what I came up with here. Sorry, is my lipstick smeared? Okay, we're good. The first selection I picked was a book written by Pamela DeBar called I'm With the Band. Now, for those who may or may not know Pamela DeBar, she is an author. She's also done columns for, I believe, Cosmopolitan, whatnot. She wrote this book sort of as a memoir of how she lived through the 60s. There was a lot of controversy when the book first came out in the 80s because we were on the tail end. Now, I'm old enough to remember going through the 80s and being subject to things like the Satanic Panic and boycotting of things that, a lot of grumpy adults didn't like. And, the AIDS epidemic scare, whatever. So having a book released by a woman detailing relationships she'd had with musicians, spiritually, emotionally, physically, whatnot, by someone who was labeled the world's most famous groupie, it definitely ruffled a few feathers. But I loved it because I wanted to read more about her life and, more importantly, her working relationships and personal relationships with Frank Zappa. Again, folks who may or may not know, she was in a band called, Pamela DeBar was also in a band called the GTOs, which was kind of put together by Frank Zappa. A bunch of ragtag girls that used to traipse around Laurel Canyon together. Yes, they were groupies. Yes, they had relationships with musicians, but they were also sort of an entertainment troupe. And Frank kind of capitalized on that. So she also was a musician. Well, in the barest sense of the word. I don't know if she actually played any musical instruments. I don't know. I don't judge. I found her writing style to be incredibly engaging and very eye-opening because like I was born in 1970, so I missed the whole 60s thing. I love the music. um, some of the notoriety around the 60s was pretty amazing. Like this is also an era where women's independence was coming into the forefront. The whole burn your bra movement and equal rights, that sort of thing. So having that voice come from this era where she pretty much just lived on her terms and was fueled by her artistic endeavors. Like she didn't just get together with the musicians to be intimate with them. She wanted to know them mentally and emotionally, musically. Like she lived for music. And I think there's a lot more to you know to this than what you see on the surface, which I absolutely loved. And like I said, her working relationships with Frank Zappa, sort of getting, a peek behind the curtain, so to speak, and seeing all this, inspiration and artistic brilliance going on, behind closed doors. Just it was very cool. Like I wanted to sort of look into that more than anything, more than just, who she slept with. Like, yes, there were notable names like, Mick Jagger and Keith Moon and, Don Johnson. The list is like, up there. But I really appreciate how she wrote it from the perspective of a fan, of someone who was seeking spiritual enlightenment, someone who wanted to pursue her own artistic developments. To me, it was a perfect blend of everything. And like I said, her writing style really kind of makes you feel like she's confiding in you. Sorry, I'm sweating. Uh, anyway, I blabbed enough about that. The second selection on the list is a book by Whitley Strieber called Cat Magic. Whitley Strieber is the same person who wrote the books The Hunger, Communion, the whole series of books about extraterrestrials and alien life, that sort of thing. As I said, he wrote The Hunger, which is one of my favorite books and movies anyway, but I put Cat Magic on the list. I could have put The Hunger. I find both the book and the movie excellent on their own, somewhat comparable, contrastable. Contrastable, is that a word? Anyway, but Cat Magic, to me, okay, full disclosure, I've been an eclectic solitary pagan for decades now, like literally decades. And reading this book when I was a teenager sort of, I'm going to say, kind of enticed me into looking into this path. I mean, obviously what's written in the book isn't representative of pagan Wiccan lore, etc., but it definitely kind of gave an oversight into group. I'm going to say covens. People hear the word coven and they think of like older women in black stirring over a cauldron and doing horrible things to babies. That's not the case. I can confirm that with my whole being. That is not what happens. It is an intriguing and interesting story about a young woman who gets pulled into life with a coven, who unfortunately is also doing battle with a local church and their local pastor, who is just absolutely reprehensible. It's not a pagans good, Christians bad book. It's just more, again, comparing and contrasting, but it's also very excellently written. I love it. It really dragged me down that rabbit hole, and like I said, it kind of kicked open some doors of my own to sort of look into this path of spirituality and where gender equality was the norm, and it really put an emphasis on I'm going to say respecting the earth and the environment, that sort of thing. So that's like I said, that's just a basic overview, but Cat Magic is an excellent story. I heavily recommend it. Okay, who's scratching? Sorry, I don't know if you guys can hear it. It's kitty cat scratching in the background. The third selection on my list is a book called The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. I stumbled across this by accident. I was in my local village where I've gotten quite a few books. I like to do like reused or recycled well, I'm going to say upcycled, but I try not to buy new. I mean, obviously, there's some things I buy new, like unmentionables, but as far as things like, you know, books and some clothing items, I try to, you know, buy secondhand or thrift. And the Night Circus was sitting on the shelf. The cover looked very intriguing. It was just a basic black cover with some shadow art in black, white, and red, which are the main color schemes of like what I've gotten from reading this book. But it's basically about a circus that is sort of the background for two magicians that have been fighting for eons. And what's happening is each magician is training a young person to sort of be their representative in this like ultimate showdown. And I won't spoil the book for you too much, but I love the concept of this night circus where it would just show up randomly in and around London, England, and nobody knew when it was coming. It would just suddenly show up out of nowhere, like all these big tents and structures and whatnot. It would stick around for a few days and then it would leave again, and the circus itself would feature performances by illusionists. Like picture like, I don't want to say your typical circus because there's no animals involved with this one, but a lot of like, you know, high-flying, death-defying feats of wonder, and it's all very magical, shall we say. What I loved about this was reading through the book. It's not linear, so it doesn't, like, it has a beginning, middle, and end, but it's all over the map. There are varying viewpoints and points of narration from various characters in the book, including the two young musicians that are being trained to sort of go against each other and do this big duel. There are observations from folks who attend the night circus. It's really cool, actually. There's sort of an unofficial dress code that's been invented by people who, sorry for the shaking, who follow the circus, where they dress all in black, but they wear something that's red, like say a red scarf or a red hat or something. So when people see them in public, like you see somebody walking down the street dressed all in black but wearing something red, it's like, aha, you follow the night circus. And then these people would get together and they would gather in groups and they would exchange information and stories about what they saw and where's it going to happen next and whatnot. Just absolutely entrancing book. I heavily recommend it. It's fantastical, it's magical, and from what I read, it originally started as an experiment from the National Novel Writing Month, which takes place every year, or for those who know, it's the NaNoWriMo. So this author decided to start writing this story for the National Novel Writing Month, and it turned into quite the novel. It's one of my favorite books. I absolutely love it. It's definitely left an impression on me. The next selection on my list, number 4, is actually a children's novel, and there's no shame in children's novels. If it's a good story and it captures your attention and imagination, it's worthy of mentioning as far as I'm concerned. And this one is by Mordecai Richler, and it is called Jacob Tutu Meets the Hooded Fang. Yes, that Mordecai Richler, the guy that wrote like Barney's Wedding and has this quite storied literary career. This was his children's novel, and I absolutely loved it. It basically follows the story of a kid named Jacob, I'm going to say nicknamed Jacob Tutu, who always repeats everything he says twice. Whether it was to try and grab somebody's attention because he had lots of sisters and brothers and friends floating around and wanted to make himself heard, or whatever reason, this was just a habit that he had. So it combined, you know, a child's coping mechanism to deal with various stimuli. It combined wrestling in the strictest sense of the word. Again, it's a tale that takes twists and turns. If there are anybody out there watching this video who have heard of this, if I mention the name Child Power, does that mean anything? Two superheroes in the book, superheroes who are known by Child Power. And that's what they have in their t-shirts, and they wear these capes. Again, I'm trying not to spoil these as much as possible, but it was a book that captured my attention when I was, oh gosh, like 7, 8 years old, and I actually still have a copy of it somewhere. So it's lasted the test of time. I absolutely love that book. Number 5 on my list is it's another, I'm going to say, biography. It's called Famous for 15 Minutes: My Years with Andy Warhol, and it was written by Ultraviolet. I have always been sort of entranced by the whole New York art scene of the 60s, 70s, whatnot. Kim Gordon from Sonic Youth, she wrote in her autobiography, Girl in a Band, about her coming up through the art and punk scene in New York as well. I found that the two kind of overlap. Just it really kind of gives you a bird's eye view into like what goes on behind the velvet rope, so to speak. Ultraviolet, she was a member of Andy Warhol's factory troupe, the early factory, the first one that went up in the 60s. I don't think I need to explain who Andy Warhol is to some of you folks, but he built what was called the factory, and the factory was meant to produce ideas and art, visual art, movies, music, you name it. The entire building was spray painted silver, I believe, inside and out. There was a chapter in her book where she described going into the factory for the first time, and one of Andy's assistants was spray paint. He was spray painting something silver, and got it on her expensive shoes. She was originally born and raised in France. Kind of grew up with a rebellious streak a mile wide, so much so that her parents tried sending her to boarding school and this and that, and they finally realized we'll have to send her to the United States so she can live with her cousin, maybe get this out of her system, and just kicked open the whole door for her to look into buying and trading art, which is how she met Andy Warhol. And I think that's when she realized she could fully express her rebellious creative streak and became part of his troupe. So to give you a bit more of a visual cue, Ultraviolet didn't come by her name accidentally. She had a thing for everything like violet, purple. Her doorway had this arch of dried violets that people would give her. She wore like violet and purple clothing. She dyed her hair violet. There's a part, she talks about how in interviews she would take a beet, like a beet vegetable, out of her purse, kind of slice into it, rub a bit of it on her cheeks to give her cheeks a bit of that blush, use some on her lips to, sort of give them a bit of a stain, that color. And she would do this during interviews, just, carve into it. And then she would, I guess, carve up the rest and eat of it later. I don't know. But she was an eccentric character. I really enjoyed reading her stories about the New York art scene. She herself was also involved with a few artists like John Chamberlain. She had a notorious affair with Salvador Dali. Just, as I said before, kind of getting a peek behind that velvet rope, looking into what goes on behind the scenes and that creative genius. Unfortunately, she passed away, I think, about 8 or 9 years ago. She passed away from cancer, so I only found out about that a while ago, but her book was absolutely wonderful to read. Loved it. Number 6 on this list is The Vampire Lestat by Anne Rice. I know with the Vampire Chronicles, there are so many books in there. There was even a crossover with the Mayfair Witches in the book Merrick. I know there were so many I could have picked from, but I went with The Vampire Lestat because that was my first foray into Anne Rice's writing. I was told it was better than Interview with the Vampire. Like, I did read Interview with the Vampire. It came across, well, I didn't know at the time that it was written from a different perspective than the main character in the Vampire Chronicles. Louis in Interview with the Vampire obviously was struggling with having a conscience while being made into this vampire that took life. But The Vampire Lestat gave more of Lestat's viewpoint. Where he was born, how he was raised, the family that he grew up with, the antics that he got up to, all the fun stuff before he was transformed into this vampire and then became a vampire rock star. There wasn't really and this is where I might get a bit of flack for it. See, Interview with the Vampire, the movie was wonderful. It, as far as I'm concerned, encapsulated the book wonderfully. I'm not going to say perfectly. There were some flaws that I nitpick at because I'm one of those geeks where, like, I read the book first and then I see the movie. I mean, if the movies were perfectly reflective of books, it might not leave some to the imagination. I'm babbling here. But anyway, let's put it this way. Like, if the books from the Lord of the Rings trilogy were exact, or the movies were exact to the books, I would have been in those theaters for like 5-6 hours at a time. But there wasn't, I mean, I know with Queen of the Damned, they did try to sort of mash together the Vampire Lestat and Queen of the Damned books. I mean, visually, it was a very cool looking movie, but as far as an accurate representation of the books, no, not at all. I could not just, oh man, we'd be here forever if I opened that Pandora's box, but I was just not, it was a good movie. It had a good premise, but if I pretend that it had nothing to do with the books, I could probably like it more. But I really enjoyed that book. I first, like I said, I first read it when I was in high school. I think I was like 17 or 18. It was a gift given to me by the person I was seeing at the time, and I just devoured it. It's still one of my favorite books to read to this day. Absolutely loved it. The next selection, number 7 on my list, is a book by Amber Lane Fisher called The Philosophy of Wicca. Now, I mentioned earlier that I have been a practitioner of paganism for a while, so I'm going to spare the whole speech about how, like, paganism and Wicca, similarities, differences. That's a video for another time, if anybody has patience to listen to that. But what I liked about this book, which was heavily recommended to me by a friend who is also a solitary practitioner of paganism, is that it really delves into the philosophical constructs of Wiccan and pagan concepts. Like, for example, there's the rule, like, do as you will and it harm none. And then it goes into the viewpoints of that, like, why was that wording chosen and how does it represent Wicca and paganism as a whole? Like, how do people hold up those tenets in their practice, that sort of thing. It really explores the thought process of that. Like, it's philosophical. Obviously, the philosophy of Wicca, it's in the name. If anybody I know is curious about exploring this path, that's one of the first books I recommend. Because, I mean, anybody can grab some jars and some herbs or some stones or tarot decks or whatever and jump in that way, and that's great. If that's what introduces people to this practice, fine. It's, as long as you're not directly inflicting harm on anybody else, go for it. But as far as reading materials, I wanted to read more than do any actual practice, and this was a great jumping point that I can introduce to people, just to get that mindset that it's more than just doing divination or spells or incantations, whatever. So it's called The Philosophy of Wicca, Amber Lane Fisher. If anybody's even remotely curious as to what that whole sphere of practice is about, I recommend looking into it. The next selection, number 8 on my list, is The Heroine Diaries by Nikki Sixx. Sorry, I thought I heard a door open. Nikki Sixx, bass player from Motley Crue. Come on out. Sorry, my husband's peeking his head out. Did I mention one of your favorite books? Okay, never mind. So this was recommended to me by my husband, who read it first. And I didn't grow up a diehard Motley Crue fan. I mean, we heard about their exploits. We listened to the music. They were considered like one of the most dangerous bands in metal and rock and roll, whatever. I don't remember my mom kicking up a fuss if I ever listened to them when I was a teenager. I quite enjoyed their music, but reading this book, because everybody, everybody who was anybody at the time heard about how Nikki Sixx died of a heroin overdose in 1987, but then was resuscitated and brought back to life, which amazing, good to hear. The book itself really travels through the tour and the events that led up to what happened that night. And it wasn't just this, tawdry tell all of like this rock band going on the road and wreaking havoc and mayhem. It was also exploring his upbringing and some of the, like, there's no other way to say it, some of the trauma that surrounds that, and some of the baggage he had from, his upbringing and how chaotic it may have been, having certain elements in his household at the time that may have pushed him into this career, looking into playing music and escapism and, being a rebel and defying authority. And it also has like some great commentary from other people that were in and around the scene at that time, like former band managers, former girlfriends, etc. Like just having their viewpoints dropped in here and there as the events unfolded to give a bit of a broader picture as to what was happening. It also inspired the side project 6 a.m. that he formed with a couple of musicians. The first album, The Heroin Diaries, was pretty much songs written that were based off of the book. Very powerful. To me, it was a story of, struggle, self-destruction, but then coming out of that. And as anybody who's gone through any sort of addiction recovery process knows, that the process itself is never linear. There's some hiccups here and there, but I just saw on Nikki's social media post that I believe he celebrated 24 years of sobriety, which is amazing. Like, good for him. I definitely applaud that. This book itself, it's, like I said, there are some ticky-tacky moments and things, but it, to me, is a story of struggle and survival. And as I said, repeated reading, I loved it. It definitely felt like you were there with him, like you're sitting there talking to him, having this conversation. I love that. I love when people write like that. The next item on the list is by Stephen King, and it is called Carrie, which was transformed into an amazing movie. Now I'm going to talk about the original. I haven't seen the remake. There have been other remakes, I'm sure, like theatrical, whatever, I don't know. But to me, the story really grabbed my attention. Like, my mom, for as long as I remember, she's always read Stephen King, even when, he had his accident and wrote those books that just stopped making sense after a while, where everything was either about spiders or aliens and spiders. I don't know. Anyway, I appreciated his work because he would always present them sort of in a way that, everything looks fine on the surface, but once you start digging, under the surface, things are incredibly messed up. And that is definitely the case with Carrie. For those who are not familiar with it, it's basically about a girl who's been bullied her entire life. She was raised in a single parent household by a fundamentalist mother, very, religious driven, very fundamentalist driven. As a result, she's been horrifically bullied through her entire life, throughout school. She finds out eventually that she has psychic abilities and she's learning how to use them. And she has this episode where she finally snaps. If you know the story, you know the story, but we'll get into it. Basically, the bullying and the harassment reach its peak at prom night, and she pretty much just snaps and wreaks havoc. To me, it stuck with me because I was bullied throughout, like, junior high school. Well, they call it middle school. I'm gonna say throughout high school. And yeah, I'll admit there are times where I wish, like, oh man, I wish I could just think about having like this invisible wave pushing all my classmates down the stairs and they break their arms, and like, obviously it's not going to happen. But I find living well and on my own terms is best revenge. But she does, in the book, Carrie does get her revenge in a big, bad, powerful way. I loved the movie adaptations, Sissy Spacek, Piper Laurie, just absolutely wonderful the way they sparred against each other. Um, just, yeah, it was a pretty good representation of the book. But the book, again, does what a lot of movies don't. It goes into details and like other points of view. It is linear, but the different narration points really bring it together. I loved it. And like I said, it's one of his earlier works, so I'm kind of fond of it. The last selection of my favorite books list, I kind of put all three of them together. It's called the Dalriada Trilogy by Jules Watson. There are 3 books in it: The Dawn Stag, The White Mare, and The Boar Stone. These books were loaned to me by my mom. She said, you'll like them because, you know, there's some Celtic folklore driven paganism themed stuff in here. That's I can't remember exactly what she said, but the first 2 books basically follow a woman by the name of Rianne, named after Rhiannon, and how she's learning to, you know, follow this path, you know, worshiping the old gods and, you know, all the different things that go into that. I'm losing touch. Sorry. It is so humid today. I swear it's evaporating my brain. But it looks into different aspects of practice in terms of like worshiping the old gods and the different celebrations and whatnot. So the trilogy of the Dalriada trilogy, again, it's something that's really stuck with me. I absolutely loved how Jules Watson wrote this. Like, it really takes you into this book. Like, her writing style just pulls you right in. I absolutely loved it. She's written other books, but this is the trio that I remember the most. I think they're out of print. I believe the only book out of this trio that's still available is The Boar Stone, and it sort of takes a different trajectory. It happens hundreds of years after the end of The White Mare, but just wonderful. Sort of getting a bird's eye view into like the Celtic life and way and methods of practice, in terms of like spiritual practice, I should say. Love it. So yeah, top 10 books: I'm With the Band by Pamela DeVar, Cat Magic by Whitley Strieber, The Night Circus by Aaron Morgenstern, Jacob Tutu Meets the Hooded Fang by Mordecai Richler, Famous for 15 Minutes, My Years with Andy Warhol by Ultraviolet, The Vampire Lestat by Anne Rice, The Philosophy of Wicca by Amber Lane Fisher, The Heroine Diaries by Nikki Sixx, Carrie by Stephen King, and The Dalriada Trilogy by Jules Watson. Now, here's hoping this video doesn't go as long as the last one, because I've got another list. It's the top 10 favorite movies. And if you made it this far, congratulations. I'm going to take a drink of a cold sip of water. If it's as hot as the devil's armpit where you are right now, I encourage you to do the same. All right, round 2. Again, this was hard to pick. The movies are kind of all over the map. Let's get to it. The first selection I picked was Suspiria, the original version, directed by Dario Argento. Came out in 1977. There was a remake that came out years ago starring Dakota Johnson and Tilda Swinton. Thank you. It was good. I would say comparable to the movie. There are some comparisons and contrasts between the two. I prefer the original. I mean, the ending for both is just kind of silly and far-fetched, but I absolutely loved it. Dario Argento is one of my favorite horror directors, period. He was known as the Italian Hitchcock. He did a lot of movies that were fell under the category of giallo, which is sort of like the Italian like horror, murder mystery type of things. Like I could wax forever about Dario Argento, but Suspiria, the basic premise of the movie is an American dance student goes to a dance academy in Germany to sort of further expand her skills and perfect her studies. And finds out along the way that the school that she's practicing at is a front for a coven of witches. So I love it. It's always, it deals with the fantastical, and the imagery is very stunning, and it's just that the screen is just saturated in primary colors. He really went to town with like splashes of like bright blues and reds and yellows, just absolutely gorgeous. Whereas the remake, I found the colors were very muted, very subtle, and you would see like bright punches of color to make a dramatic impact. Also, the soundtrack to the original Suspiria was done by a band called Goblin. I believe Dario himself collaborated with them to make the music, and he would actually play the soundtrack very loud on the set to sort of, intensify the mood. I love it. It's to be honest, it's my favorite horror movie. And if Fiber Spider's watching this, if he wants to do a top 10 favorite horror movies, I am down for that. This would be the number one, by the way. This would be my top pick. Number 2 on my list of favorite movies, I gotta go with Labyrinth by David Bowie. Or not by David Bowie, he's in it. Oh my god, my brain. These two, like number 1 and 2 selections on my favorite movie list, are pretty much accurate. Labyrinth, starring David Bowie as Jareth the Goblin King. I remember seeing this movie in the theaters when I was like 15 in the summer of 1986, and saw it again on the big screen a few years ago with a couple of friends who, I don't even know if they were alive when the movie came out, but seeing it on the big screen and watching their reactions, especially when we were seeing close-ups of Jareth, the Goblin King. If you know, you know. I won't go into detail. The premise of this movie, a young girl by the name of Sarah, she lives with her dad and stepmom, and she's asked to babysit her brother Toby, stepbrother, well, half-brother, whatever. And of course, baby being fussy, she wishes him away to be sent to the, Goblin City, which happens. She makes a wish, surprise. And now it's up to her to try and get him back. And she meets a whole bunch of fun characters along the way. Jim Henson was, let's put it this way, Jim Henson and Terry Jones were the brains behind this movie. So there's a lot of puppetry, there's a lot of fantastical characters. The soundtrack is just gorgeous. I mean, of course it is, because David Bowie is in it and he actually sings in it, and it's wonderful. It really encapsulated my attention. Like, yes, I was a teenager, but I mean, I've always been a Bowie fan anyway. It was funny because a year later I went to see him in concert. Like a year after Labyrinth came out, I went to see him in 1987. It was awesome. Anyway, wonderful, wonderful movie. I can watch it to this day. It's funny, actually. There's a theater in Kitchener, just a half hour from where I live, that used to do movies, like specific theme movie nights. Like they would have quote-alongs and sing-alongs and whatnot. And last summer, was it last summer? I think it was last summer or the summer before, I went with my husband, my sister, and my best friend Beth to this theater called the Apollo, to a sing-along viewing of Labyrinth, and it was a lot of fun. We had a blast. It was great. The Apollo still exists. They don't do theme nights like that anymore, which is sad, but yeah, loved it. Loved it. Next selection on my list is a movie called Dance Me Outside. It's directed by a Canadian director by the name of Bruce McDonald. If anybody knows who that is, he is an incredible director. He bases, like, the movies are all like based pretty much in Canada or have huge chunks of Canadiana put in them. His first movie, Roadkill, was basically about this guy who was going on a road trip. I don't know if he was like a roadie for the Ramones. I can't even remember. It's been that long since I've seen it. But it actually does include a cameo with Joey Ramone in the movie, which made me so happy. But when he did Roadkill, and it was entered into a film contest where he won the grand prize, which I believe at the time was $100,000. This was eons ago. This was like early 90s-ish, late 80s, early 90s. And when he was asked what he was going to do with the prize money, he said he was going to find, how can I do this in a PG manner? He said he was going to find the biggest quantity of a certain cannabinoid product that money could buy. Again, if you know, you know. I'm trying to keep this as PG as possible. But as I said, he is a prolific film director. The soundtracks to all his movies are amazing. Dance Me Outside, which is the selection I'm going with. I remember that one of the taglines for the movie was where you can find Sweetgrass and Metallica in the same car. It basically is a story about a tragedy that happens in First Nations Reserve in Northern Ontario. I want to say it's a coming of age story because it does deal with kids in their teens coming to terms with a very tragic event that happens in their community and how they grow and deal with this. I can't, again, I don't want to spoil it. I don't want to give it away too much, but it also highlights, the inequalities and how the justice system has treated First Nations people. I know a lot of my American friends say, well, Canada's not racist. Canada's like the least racist country. I wish I could agree with you, but unfortunately, Canada, most specifically the Canadian government and its history with treatment of First Nations people, needs a lot of work, to put it incredibly mildly, and Dance Me Outside does have hints of that as well. But once again, the soundtrack is amazing. It features a lot of Canadian bands like the Headstones, Leslie Spit Trio. I absolutely love it. It's it's something I would recommend. Like if somebody wanted to say, like, hey, give me a film to watch to get a bird's eye view on like Canadian culture. This is pretty much anything by Bruce McDonald I would suggest, to be honest. But I absolutely love Dance Me Outside. It also features a lot of actors that have gone on to do other things, like Jennifer Podemsky. She's a Canadian actress. She was one of the main stars in this movie. Adam Beach, who has gone on to do a bunch of stuff in and around Hollywood. Fun. I recommend it. Next up on the list is the movie Prometheus. It takes place in the same universe, so to speak, as the Alien movies. It was initially built as sort of a prequel to Alien, but not quite. I wouldn't say it was a direct prequel. It's more, like I said, in the same universe. It's a sci-fi horror movie directed by Ridley Scott. So there's sort of a nugget of an inception of the Alien franchise, but not quite. Like I said, it's sort of next to, but not directly related. Sort of like I don't know, maybe like a cousin-ish. It's hard to explain without giving the plot away. But I mean, if anybody's seen the Alien movies, it's a bunch of xenomorphs running around, wreaking havoc, killing people, etc. So that's why I say it's a sci-fi horror. It looks into, I'm going to say, some archaeologists that want to go to a planet where they believe is like sort of like the source of life, what they call the engineers. This ancient race that sort of created humans, etc. And it raises some pretty interesting questions, like, well, who engineered the engineers, and so forth. There's a lot of art. The art direction in this movie, let's just say H.R. Giger would be proud if he were able to see it today. Just beautiful. It's one of my absolute favorite movies. The role that Michael Fassbender played of the android named David, just seeing him so, like, he's one of my favorite actors, and just seeing him so, I want to say, emotionally detached, seeing him play this android was incredible. And from what I read, he got a lot of inspiration for his character watching David Bowie in The Man Who Fell to Earth. Sorry. But I'm not going to mention anything about Alien Resurrection? No, not Resurrection. Oh, what was the other one that came after that? Alien Covenant. Whew. It's supposed to be a continuation of Prometheus, but I hated it. Hated it. It was awful. But I love Prometheus. Wonderful. Bent my brain. The next selection on the list is The Princess Bride. I have to put this in here. I really struggled with certain movies I wanted to put in here. I had to put in The Princess Bride. It's, again, I mean, I could have put it in the same line as Labyrinth. They came out roughly at the same time, maybe a year apart. Classic storybook movie with a lot of adult humor, and I don't mean like potty mouth or, you know, suspect or risque adult humor, but very funny, very you know, cerebrally, you know, heightened humor. I loved it. Just I can't expound enough on The Princess Bride, but I'm gonna cut it short because this has already gone on long enough. Again, soundtrack is gorgeous. Cinematography, beautiful. I believe it was about 5 years ago, there was, I want to say, a remake that went around on YouTube. Different segments were filmed by different actors and actresses, different locales, and sort of all patched together. One of the notable characters in The Princess Bride is a huge individual played by Andre the Giant. The character's name is Fezzik. Good-natured giant. He's aware of his strength. So I'm not going to say he doesn't know his own strength, but wonderful character. In one of the segments of the remake, he was recreated by Dave Bautista, which I was not surprised at all. The guy's got a great sense of humor. And before Dave Bautista cut a bunch of weight, he was pretty man. He was a wrestler. Both he and Andre the Giant were wrestlers, for God's sake. So they were like larger than life. But if you haven't seen the Princess Bride movie yet, what are you doing with your life? That's all I'm going to say. Number 6, again, same as the last time. I had like some selections written in, like crossed out and written over, whatever. Number 6 on the list is Sleeping Beauty, the Disney animated version. I loved it. Classic fairy tale, princesses and evil queens and dragons and the whole thing. For the record, I'm just going to go on a little tangent here. Maleficent, in my opinion, was not a villain, and I'm so glad that they kind of explored that with the Maleficent movies. I believe she was misunderstood. Maybe, you know, putting that curse on Aurora when she was a baby in the bassinet was a little, you know, heavy-handed, but classic fairy tale, princess condemned to a terrible fate, spirited away by her 3 godmothers, fairy godmothers. I wish I had a fairy godmother. Comes of age, you know, supposed to go back home, but things go awry, let's just say. And as I said, the big, you know, flames and dragons and the prince fighting the dragon and being the hero. And yeah. I think I was 6 years old when my mom first took me to see that in the theater. And it turns out it's actually my sister's favorite Disney movie too. So, loved it. Loved it. Number 7 on the list is a movie called Velvet Goldmine, directed by Todd Haynes. The movie came out in 1999. It stars Jonathan Rhys Meyers, Susie Azard, Toni Collette, Christian Bale. It's got Ewan McGregor. It's got like a literal cast of thousands. The cast is star-studded. It's basically, the best way I can describe Velvet Goldmine is it is a glitter-encrusted love letter that Todd Haynes wrote to the 1970s glitter rock scene. Like, the soundtrack is just packed with songs from the likes of like Roxy Music, Mott the Hoople, Slade. Oh my gosh, just amazing. It basically follows the story of a journalist who is piecing together, like he's trying to put together a story regarding the disappearance of a musician by the name of Brian Slade, who disappeared around the height of his career around like 1977, 1978. Up until then, the years building up to his disappearance, he was known as creating glam rock. And the characters' aesthetics are very reminiscent of a certain thin white duke. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. He has a beautiful American wife who puts on the most phony English accent. Uh, Takes on a musical partner who may or may not have engaged in romantic relations with him, who bears a rather striking resemblance to Iggy Pop. The script pretty much writes itself. Oh, and the Svengali mastermind manager of Brian Slade being played by Susie Azard to the full hilt. Absolutely gorgeous. Jonathan Rhys-Meyers plays Brian Slade, gorgeous, young, beautiful, pouty-lipped glam rock musician. And it's also sort of a neat commentary on queer culture as well, because glam rock really, I'm going to say, kicked the door open for, like, shall we say, exploring boundaries and gender bending and, doing things outside the norm as far as like appearances and social mores, which I absolutely love. That's one of the reasons why I think I love glitter rock anyway. But I love the soundtrack. I love the movie. It's amazing. I still pull it out every once in a while to watch it. I'm about an average of like once a month. Like I said, the soundtrack is amazing. If this is something that's up your alley, I highly recommend it. Number 8 on my list is, now this was a bit of a hard choice because I had to put something Star Wars related in here. And I mean, I could have gone with something from the original trilogy, which would have kept true to the whole mythos of the Star Wars universe. But I had to put in Episode 7, The Force Awakens. I mean, I do love the original trilogy. I would say The Empire Strikes Back is probably my favorite of those 3 movies. But like the prequels, they weren't bad, but I'm probably going to get some heat for this, but I personally found they did not age well. But the sequels, shall we say, episodes 7, 8, and 9, I thought were fun. They continued the saga without, well, I mean, episode 7, there were some tropes in there that were reminiscent of the original trilogy that I was talking about with a friend of mine, and he was quite exasperated by them, but I thought they were funny. But the storyline is very similar, like this, young figure that's growing up isolated from their family, doing what they can to make ends meet and get by. They find themselves suddenly thrust into this intergalactic conflict, shall we say, while, trying to find their sense of purpose in life in general as they go. The main character, Rey, I absolutely loved her. She was just full of, like, I'm going to say spunk and firepower. You see some of the usual cast members show up as well, which was wonderful. But seeing that in the theater, I went to see it in the theater more than once, let's just say. When it came out, I became slightly obsessed with the movie. I even dressed up as Rey for Halloween that year. I think the year after. It's absolutely one of my favorite movies in the franchise. It really re-injected that energy and love of the Star Wars universe. Absolutely wonderful. And I could go off on a tangent, but I've effused enough, shall we say. I loved it. If there was a selection, I had to make that one. I'm sorry, purists. I had to go with that. Number 9, there were 2 selections that I wrote because I put them both in the same line because I find that whenever I watch one, I have to watch the other back to back. It's sort of my double bill. And it's Rock and Roll High School and the Rocky Horror Picture Show. Both movies came out, well, I'd say Rocky Horror came out in 75, so Rock and Roll High School came out, I want to say 79, 80. I think it was like just before the turn of the decade. Rocky Horror is definitely the musical. Rock and Roll High School is about music. But it just, I don't know, for me, it always seemed weird to watch one and not watch the other. It's one of my personal favorite double bills that I do for myself. Rocky Horror, no explanation needed. Young couple just got engaged and they're off to tell their teacher slash mentor all about it, but they become hopelessly lost along the way, and chaos ensues. I'm not even going to go near the remake. Some things should have just been left alone. That's all I'm going to say. But it does go along with what Velvet Goldmine did in terms of like um, defying sexual and gender norms, which I love. Absolutely wonderful. Rock and Roll High School. The premise is a young girl, huge fan of the band The Ramones, really wants to go see them in concert. She lives like the rock and roll lifestyle, but there's a new principal taking over the school who just does not, she frowns upon things that teenagers see as good and fun, like, wearing your hair long and listening to rock music, and just, she's basically a killjoy. But one of my favorite movies. And actually, when I would watch it when I was younger, I'd be like, wow, I want to see the Ramones live, because there is a part where the girl and a friend of hers, they do get to go see the Ramones live. And it just looked like so much chaos and fun seeing, like, at this concert. I remember thinking, I really want to see the Ramones live. I think it would be a lot of fun. It looks like that would be a great time. And I actually did go see the Ramones a couple times after that, in 1992 and 96. And both times it was a general admission audience. So a lot of pushing and shoving, mosh pit. I got my backside handed to me, and it was absolutely worth it. 10 out of 10 recommend. So yeah, that I kind of put those two together, like I said, as one selection. They both kind of fit the same vibe, so just have to. It's my list. I can do what I want. And the last selection on my movie list is a film directed by Jean Cocteau, who was a French poet, playwright, author, artist. He was at the head of the surrealist movement of the 20th century. He directed a movie, Beauty and the Beast, known in French as La Belle et la Bête. It's a black and white movie that came out, I'm going to say, in 1946. It was 1946, because the costumes, from what I understand, I was reading that the costumes for this movie, so it's Beauty and the Beast, it's the same story, but it's told from this French surrealist point of view. The special effects used in this movie, this is 1946, so there was no CGI, there was no AI, there was no camera trickery, but what was used for this movie to create these visual illusions defies description. I can't even put it into words. It's absolutely magnificent. I mean, it's Jean Cocteau. Imagine if, like, say, I don't know, Salvador Dali made movies for a living and what they would look like. It's kind of like that vibe. It defies description. It's absolutely incredible. It's all black and white. Follows the same story of Beauty and the Beast. Somebody being forced into indentured servitude at a castle with this beast-like being. The story. There's a rose involved. There's greedy relatives involved. There's a guy who thinks he knows everything that's involved, etc. Beautiful, absolutely beautiful, and it's all in French. I don't know if there's a version available with English subtitles, but it did get I believe the DVD did get the Criterion treatment. I absolutely love it. It's one of my absolute favorite movies. I've always had a thing for surrealist artists anyway. Even though I mentioned Andy Warhol earlier, he was a pop artist. I loved his stuff, but I loved, like, Man Ray, Cocteau, Dali. Like, that's my favorite, shall we say, art form. La Belle et la Bête. You can find it on YouTube as well, I believe. I think I'll have to go dig for it later. The costumes were gorgeous. From what I read, the costumes for La Belle et la Bête were made in the Parisian house of Lanvin. So very high fashion, very over the top, very beautiful, refined. I'm running out of adjectives, but if you like a nice black and white, surrealist driven fairy tale of a movie, check out La Belle et la Bête. All right, I believe I have blathered on enough. So top 10 favorite movies: Suspiria, the original; Labyrinth; Dance Me Outside; Prometheus; The Princess Bride; Sleeping Beauty, the Disney version; Velvet Goldmine; Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens; Rock and Roll High School / Rocky Horror Picture Show; and La Belle et la Bête. That's it for me. I know I owe some folks a Where the Heck Have I Been video. I will get to that at some point. For now, I'm going to draw it to a close here. If you made it to this point and you like what you saw, please give this video a thumbs up. I appreciate any and all positive feedback. If you haven't yet done so already, please go down here and click the subscribe button and also hit the notification bell. It will let you know when I put up more videos. Oh, and I want to tag some people before I forget. I think it's going to be a lot of the same suspects from the last time. So here are my tags. Crystal, the Yarny Chicken Crazy Cat Lady. I want to know what videos and books you like to indulge in. Tori at Polly's Crocheted Creations. Diane at My Pink Bathtub Knits. The Naked Snail. Dee's Creative Hands Crochet. Mama G Gear. Mama G, are you here? I know you were last time. There was a couple others, and I just drew a blank. Oh my gosh. I'll include you in the in the body of the comments. But yeah, if you're into it, great. If not, that's okay. I just thought I'd throw you a line. Anyway, like I said, I'm gonna draw it here. Stay safe. Take care of yourselves. Keep making cool stuff. Stay hydrated, especially if you're like me, living in the middle of this like humidity, hell. As you can tell, the curls are just loving it. So yeah, stay hydrated. Take your vitamins. Keep making cool stuff. Take care of yourselves, and hopefully we will talk again very soon. All right. Bye.